I started in the summer of 2019, just doing whatever. I just started something. I had been doing a bit of blogging and talking about self awareness for creatives, pretty much. So it was really, common wisdom things like you don't need to be taking a picture every time you do something. You could just experience the moment. You don't need to be productive every second of the day. Your mental health does not mean that you have to be doing something for someone else every second of the day. Think
Right.
about doing stuff for yourself as well to accommodate your own mental health and allow you to have more to give other people when you are ready to do that. So, things like that, just like really simple, common wisdom type things that just some people need to be told. And I did that for about 30 episodes. It was called Jodi's Silver Linings. It was really kind of this silly little podcast that I just did because I had no idea what to do. I didn't really know anything about podcasts, not a lot. I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do. And after 30 episodes, people started asking me to be a life coach. And well, because what happens is when you do a podcast, whatever you happen to be talking about, people consider you to be an authority in, right? So I'm sitting here
Yeah,
talking about common wisdom, and they're
I'm
like,
starting to actually I'm starting to actually see that, especially with the
yeah,
people that I'm talking with, and I not gonna lie, it's really weird because I can't process this in my head. I'm like, why me? Why are you asking me?
I know. It seems well, I mean, it's not counterintuitive because when you are putting yourself out in a podcast, you are basically the authority on that particular subject, whatever it is
Right.
you're talking about or interviewing people about. And when I started my new podcast, and that was November 2019, I I kind of decided that I wanted to do something that was more in line with what my business is. So, the reason that I decided to start audio branding was because as a voice actor, I was noticing that not a lot of people were putting emphasis on the sound of their productions. What was happening was I was being added as the last ditch thing on the end of their pretty project, right? They hadn't thought about the voiceover until that very moment, and suddenly they needed to hire someone, right? So, it kind of it it made me a little upset for the people who work in sound because sound is equally as important as visuals because the sound portion of that is what makes you care. You can see pretty visuals, you can love what you're looking at, you can see a really nice picture, but unless there's music behind it or a voiceover explaining what this is about or why you're even showing the picture, giving you emotional cues, there's no reason to care
Like a
about
laugh
it.
track, for example.
Well, or a laugh track, sure. But, like when you're in a scary movie, if you turn off the sound on a scary movie and just watch the movie, are you scared? I
No.
don't think so. It's because the music and the sound effects give you the emotional cues to feel what you should be feeling,
You know,
right?
a great example I can think of is Scream,
Mhm.
because when we started seeing comedy horror, I think this was the first time you can actually see where audio took a good play because it's horror, but you're sitting there laughing. You can't stop laughing. It's
Yeah.
just so funny, but it's horror.
Yeah.
But you realize if you turned off, I've done this. You just turn
Mhm.
off the visuals, and you just listen to the audio. You're still laughing. It's because of the audio. You see times how crucial you
Yeah.
need audio to literally make a genre possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, totally true. And yet, it's only really been in the last well, I mean, I think mainstream, it's really only been the last 5 or so years that people are starting to pay more attention to it, and I think that
Really
the yeah, because I
crazy.
think I think that COVID and everybody at home and doing this all remotely and wanting human connection but not being able to be in person, yes, Zoom had this huge resurgence and became, I was a member of Zoom way before the pandemic. Just like I was using it for all sorts of things. But
Mhm.
in the pandemic, it just went like it just went through the roof, right? But Clubhouse, things like social audio, things that allow people to communicate voice to voice where they didn't need to be in the same place to be able to hear each other. And it kind of drove home to me the fact that our authentic selves are displayed in audio as much as it is in the visuals. And you can hear what someone means. You get context by hearing their voice speak words, right? If you're reading the words, you don't always get the context. So,
Necessarily, yeah.
yeah, so text is great, emails are fine,
There's no
but
context.
there's no
There's no
context.
feeling, no
Yeah.
emotions, nothing.
Yeah, I use a lot of emoticons in
Yes,
in
I do
just
too.
about every, like, email
Yes,
I send
same.
or anything. Yeah, just because that's the only way to get it across otherwise, right?
Well, the cool thing is, especially when you have friends or family, you create a pattern
Mhm,
with this type of communication. And I feel this happens throughout the mainstream, especially with audio. Because, like, think of your favorite genre.
mhm.
If I start doing like a tune, dun, 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 you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's
Yeah,
universal.
yeah.
So that in itself has become a staple within culture, and in
Mhm,
itself is a reminder of not only is our history shown within um, context of murals on walls, hand cave drawings or structures like the Colosseum, but now audio.
yeah. And I mean, I would never say that it's only been the 5 years since people have been paying attention to audio or working with audio, definitely not. I mean, there are people who make their livings at this on a regular basis, and I commend every one of them. What I meant to say was that the last 5 years have really brought it to the public's attention in a much more public way. Things like Christopher Nolan's use of music as a separate character in his films. I mean, it really is. Unfortunately, to the detriment of hearing the dialogue, but he's thinking about it, right?
Yeah,
And
100%.
yeah, there are all sorts of audio branding companies out there that are now starting to really see companies, big companies, come to them needing audio branding, wanting to add that audio component to an already stellar visual, or
I
even not even having a visual and wanting the whole thing to work together and going visual and audio at the same time, which you really didn't see. Unless they were huge, huge companies, you didn't really see a whole lot of that going on. So yeah.
yeah, I like to bring this up, and I want to hear your thoughts on
Mhm,
this. I think that there were two crucial periods for audio in the 20th century, and I guess now we have in the past 5 years here in the 21st century.
mhm,
When we went from silence films in the early 1900s to the development of audio, just to let a lot of people know, back then the audio and video were not together. They had no way of doing that. That didn't actually happen, believe it or not, until the 1950s. Isn't that crazy? So stars like Lucille Ball had her audio track was separate, and then there was a video that was recorded, and then they put the two together. Like The Wizard of Oz was made like this, Gone with the Wind. That's the only ways they had. So there was from this period from like the teens all the way to the 1940s trying to figure out a way of how can we make audio more accessible, more powerful for motion picture. And then you had the period with jingles. Like, come on, I remember jingle, like kind of
oh
listening to little
yeah,
jingles as kids.
yeah,
That was a crucial part of advertising and marketing and way of brands of bringing people to buy their products. But you're right. There really hasn't been something like that in 60 years. It's been a really long time.
yeah. I mean, film soundtracks are an art form, and they have always been an art form. And that I'm so in awe of anyone who can make a movie soundtrack. It's just like the idea of that is so overwhelming to my brain. But not only that, using the music in order to influence what you're seeing and what you're feeling when you're watching something on screen as far as movies are concerned. But taking that and putting it into the advertising realm. So there are advertisements that can make me cry because the music and the topic and whatever else it is, and I'm just like a waterworks. I can't help myself, right?
Pharmaceutical commercials
I
every time.
But, you're right about the jingles as well. I think that there was a time period for a while there when they were super, super incredibly popular, and they got kind of cheesy.
I
But
know.
almost the cheesiness made them more memorable. So, now we're in a period where jingles aren't really available in the same way that they were, but we're going into a more it's almost audio branding with less of a slogan, say, verse than it is speaking the company name in a musical way. And
Yeah.
with our current musicality, right? Like the current music trends that we hear. And so it doesn't sound like jingles of the past to us. It doesn't sound like anything I would recognize as
Ye
a jingle,
but
but
you
it
know what they're
is.
doing? You know what they're doing, though, which is kind of hilarious, and I've noticed this? They're taking songs that were written in the '60s and '70s,
Mhm.
and the most funniest thing, I saw this clip and I was laughing my brain off. You know the brand, I think ASOS, ASOS, okay? They recently did a commercial, like, there was an ad, it had audio branding, like, across the charts, was really
Okay.
great. They had it was a pair of pants, it was a green pair of pants. So this person did a little bit of research, went to a 1971 Sears catalog. Turns out this company just took that pattern from 1971, refinished it to their own liking, had companies come together and create this whole ad and have
Mhm.
this product that is supposedly made in 2023, but
Oh,
it's not. And they're
yeah.
not the only brand that's doing this.
Mhm.
So, especially with what you're bringing up right now, you have to ask yourself this question of, are they trying to do something to just reminisce about the past, or they realizing that there was something about the past that got customers and people more entertained by their products, and that's what they're leaning towards? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I do think it's a bit of both because when I think about who has the buying power right now, it's the people who are it's the people who grew up in the '80s. Let's tell it like it is. Unfortunately, I don't know if I don't know what the population density is, like whether there's more of one generation or another. I really don't know. But, the boomer generation still has a lot of money to spread around, and
The
that's
silent
kind of
generation, believe it or not, also has a lot of money to spread around.
Oh, Gen X? Yeah, and, Gen X, like, I'm part of Gen X, and we're like the forgotten generation.
I think by far,
So
I'll be honest, especially like with talking with people from Gen X, I think it's one of the coolest generations
well, I
because,
would agree, but, I'm a
but
little biased.
no, but seriously, like some of the greatest writers,
Mhm.
marketers, entrepreneurs, business owners right now, they're all Gen Xers. Like, think
Yeah.
about it. Yeah, all born in the '70s, late '60s. I love
Mhm.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, when you're talking about who are you talking to depending on what your
Right.
product is, I mean, obviously depending on what your product is, but if you're talking about trying to reach an older audience, then, yeah, hit them where they lived. Right? I mean, repurpose the '70s and '80s, and you've got a ready-made audience there, right?
It's kind of crazy though, because you have to then ask, like, are you dealing with then a very biased audience? Or because
Probably.
I like to believe that you can be able to capture a really creative audience, people that are looking for something different, something that's interesting, and something that would inspire them, and maybe they could learn something from.
Oh, totally, totally. And I think part of what advertisers these days have to contend with is that they can't only pull from the past, they have to make it relevant to the current, right? So you can't just take something from the 70s and display it as something you should buy now, because that's not going to appeal to people. So you need to pretty it up, even if you're taking it from 1971, you know?
Right.
You need to make it work with today's sensibilities and today's appreciation and what people want today, as opposed to just going with what was acceptable in the past. So there's a lot of creativity, I think, that comes into melding those two things. And I don't think that we should ever forget our past. I just don't think that it's the only good thing about what we're living now.
Right. It's a different it's a different outlook, and it's a different approach, I feel. But there is a lot of things that we can grow from now. I mean, especially
Mhm.
with the advancements of technology, there are so many ways that you can create as a musician, as an artist, as a
Oh, yeah.
songwriter.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot. It's never been harder, however, for musicians to make a living. And as we're now experiencing, it's never been harder for working actors to make a living either. So, yeah, I mean, the 1% isn't gonna be hurt, but everyone else who's walking that picket line right now, are fighting the good fight.
They have to. I
Yeah.
mean, to be able to make proper change and to have an actual outcome. I mean, if you're working in audio, especially audio branding, and you're
Mhm.
working that to not only for products but for relevant projects for artists, again, like the whole thing is that it's not only just for yourself. That's great. It's great to be strong as an individual and be able to capture something for yourself as an artist and be strong in that way. But at the same time, you want to be able to have an audience to capture at the same time. You want people to experience it.
Mhm.
Isn't that the point? Why are
Oh,
we doing this?
definitely.
Right.
Yeah. And yet, people don't really respect creatives as much as they could. Witness Spotify. As much as Spotify has made it equal, I guess, for everybody to be able to hear music, which I love that idea. It unfortunately has done that at the expense of the artists, because the artists can't make a living from what they're making from Spotify plays. And they have to figure out some way to make their own communities in order to be supported. Because the majority of artists of any kind, the majority of creative people that I know who are putting really lovely works of art into the world right now, can barely keep a roof over their head. And that to me is really sad. And it says a lot about our current society. And I think that's really unfortunate.
It shows where our values really lie.
Yeah.
I mean, I work a 9 to 5 to
Hmm.
survive. I don't make a living off of this podcast. I haven't,
Yeah.
but that's okay. I love doing what I do, and
Hmm.
I'll keep on doing it. But I have said this before. People keep on saying, why are there so many mass shootings? Why do we have so many problems and issues? I think the three fundamentals, me personally, is there's no respect for mental health in this country. None.
Hmm.
Two, there's no respect for creative or art or being passionate. That's number three is life skills.
Yeah.
Most people are not even taught life skills at all. There's no class in high school called life. They don't teach you any of that thing. So
I wish there was.
I wish there was too, but there isn't. And it's so strange. How do you expect people to be successful artists? And then you'll have people say, well, why do we need artists? I'm like, are you kidding me? You mean we don't need artists?
Yeah, I mean, I've been listening to some of the social media discussions about this whole SAG-AFTRA strike thing, and some of the vitriol coming from people is amazing. And yet they're the same people that pay for Netflix and pay for Disney Plus and pay for Paramount Plus and go to see movies and watch the television. And what do you think's going to happen when these people stop making this stuff? Yes, there's older stuff. Okay. Don't you want something new? Don't you want to make a creative society work? I mean, like, I, I don't get it when people say that kind of thing. I don't understand. As a creative person myself, I can't even imagine the world without creativity. It would be so boring and bland and blah, and the same people would be complaining.
It's crazy, and it's I I look forward to the future, but I'm also terrified
Mm, yeah.
because I am I am afraid of what kind of life can we possibly give people that are artists. And a lot of the times people that are artists are people that come from traumatized homes. A lot of them
Mm,
come from foster care systems
hmm.
and or single moms, for the example, single dads. And it's just it's devastating because where is the outlook? Where is the possibility? There is none. I had to build everything to get here. And that's not easy. It took me probably
No.
about 7 or 8 years just to get right now where I'm talking to you. And
Hmm.
I can't even imagine where it took you to get where you are now with your podcast and with all the work that you're doing. It's a scary thought, and I
Hmm.
don't want to think about it, but you have to think about it.
Yeah. There's I do like to have a sunnier outlook on
Okay.
the future. I hope that we as human beings will recognize that creativity is what really makes life worth living. I mean, I don't know about you, but like, I'm sure that people who love numbers enjoy their finance job. I'm sure. I'm sure that there are lots of people doing what I might think of as boring jobs that they love. And that is absolutely fantastic. I would wish a happy career on anyone who wants one. But what I would say is for anyone who's stuck in a dead end job, who hates it, who doesn't know where they're going with it, what are they doing on the side? What people are doing on the side is something creative, or they're trying to do a side hustle so that they can get out of that job and do something else on a regular basis that they actually care about. There's all sorts of ways to approach this thing called life. And everyone has their own ways of finding fulfillment. But I would suggest that a lot of people are looking into creativity and various things around creativity in order to make life worth living. And if you see that that life worth living won't keep a roof over your head, that's really upsetting.
It is.
That's yeah, that's apocalyptic for me. Like, like that's the end of the world right there. Like if you don't support your creatives, what are you doing? What meaning does your place really have? Like
Right.
like how are you expressing yourself? What are you doing with the free time that you supposedly have? Like I don't know.
The other thing, like I've noticed, it's called quiet quitting. I don't know if
Ah,
you
yes, I have
yeah.
noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I don't like working a corporate job. I don't like working 9 to 5.
Mhm.
But here's here's the thing, and I like your attitude, and I like your relationship towards that of having a brighter outlook of look, the situation is what it is, right?
Mhm.
But if you're a creative person and you want to be an artist, there are plenty of ways that you yourself can make those opportunities possible. You
Mhm.
know, there are plenty of things available online. There are plenty of really cool bars and venues that you can meet people. All it takes, I feel, is just the push and the drive to do it, but
Mhm.
also understanding that there is life that you have to deal with on top of it. And that is just the reality of being alive.
Mhm.
And I feel it's something you just have to be able to accept. And quiet quitting, I don't think is a solution. I feel that it's just being lazy.
Yeah, I think it depends on the situation. There
It does.
are yeah, I mean, oh, it's a tough call because everyone's situation is different, and I would never
Everyone.
yeah, I would never say that anyone should or shouldn't because I don't know what their situation is. But
Right.
what I would say is that if you are still doing your job and you are doing your job well, and no one in management can complain about the type of job you're turning in, whatever it is you're doing, I mean, live your life. You know what I mean? Like that's if that's considered quiet quitting, then okay. But if you're not doing the job you were paid to do, that's something else. So, but that doesn't mean that you have to stay overtime when you're not getting paid overtime. It doesn't mean that you have to go in on a Saturday when you were never hired to work on a Saturday or do this extra project when that was never part of your job description. That's just setting your boundaries. I don't know that I would call that quiet quitting so
Right.
much as I would say those are my boundaries. This is what you were paying me for. If you want to pay me more, I'm all for doing that thing. But unless you're going to do that, I have a life to live. You have a life to live.
Right.
you know, and I get that that's sometimes hard to say to an employer, but it really depends on the situation. Again.
It really depends on the situation, and I also feel it's all about finding yourself again.
Hmm.
The thing about you want, I feel for myself, being a successful artist is also coming to the realization is you want the success, you have to also have a stable foundation. Because if you're in a situation where you're homeless and you're living on the streets and you're a great artist, you're a great artist and you're really talented, you're going to have a very difficult time getting yourself out of that situation on top of that and being a successful artist.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying that corporate is fear, and I'm not saying that that is the right direction. What I'm saying is that I can hear even from your own self that if you want to be able to create you yourself as a, you create your own platform, you have to figure out like what is beneficial for you right now.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, how in the airplane description before when they're telling you about, put your air mask on before you put your child's on,
Yes.
I mean, that's so that you are able to help. You have to think of yourself and your own mental well-being, not because you're being selfish, but because you need to have that foundation you were talking about in order to do anything for anybody else. So if you're not secure in your situation, that's where you need to focus. And what I would say also is that creatives of just about any type these days are much more easily able to make their own communities. There's one thing that this modern age has taught us, and that is that a lot of things can happen remotely. A lot of participation can happen remotely, and communities can start up for any reason. And creatives should really be making their own communities in order to be supported by the people who are fans of what they do.
Right.
Because Spotify isn't going to pay you.
No. Neither is Apple.
Or, yeah, or any other large corporation. They're there to make their money.
Yep.
They don't care about you at all. But you want to make sure that you have a community of people who do care about what you contribute. And that is more easily able to happen now than it ever has been. And of course, we're coming up on like Web 3.0 and the blockchain and all of those really interesting parts of our remote connection that are becoming more and more interesting. And they're not
Yeah.
easy yet. they're not easy to do yet, but I think that they will be. And when they're a little more, when the barrier to entry is a little lower, I think a lot of people will start going on board that. And
It's a
hopefully that'll help creatives.
well, it's a different age. Like I got into digital art quite a few years ago, actually during the pandemic. I got an iPad and an Apple Pencil, and I was like, "This is alien. This is strange. I don't understand." But was able to develop both of the logos for Lost in the Groove and American Groove digitally. Those are digital logos that I did. Um, and it's so cool because as an artist, I have so many different ways of creativity. Like I can create, this is crazy. I can create an image that is this small, but I can zoom it in like that big and then put in all the lines. And then you can zoom out and it's this tiny. What? So
Yeah,
I
so much cool
totally
stuff.
I totally love, especially where technology has gone, because it has
Hmm.
made us as artists so much more accessible. There's so many more things you can create.
Yes, definitely. And that barrier to entry for anyone who wants to be creative is really low right now. But I would also say that even if people don't feel that they're going to make a living from their creative endeavors, it's still worth doing. And it's not like whether or not you want to make a professional career out of it, if you want to sing and you're not a singer and you can barely hold a tune, go ahead, sing. Go ahead. If it feeds your soul, do it. That's one of those things, or find an instrument where you don't need to use your voice.
A lot of people have done that.
Exactly, exactly. There's tons of ways. So, yeah.
I it, I find it sometimes so strange because I I play an instrument. I play guitar, and I actually like I've written songs. I've done chords progressions, but I don't really. I've posted some things publicly, but not really. I keep it very private. And it's really fun when I meet artists and I'm like, "Oh, you're a guitarist or you're a singer. Oh my god, where can I find you?" They're like, "Oh, I don't really post things." I'm like, "Neither do I."
I love that that's a kinship.
Yeah, immediately, but I sometimes feel that it really depends where you are in life.
Mhm.
That's also a key marker. I don't always think everything, especially when it comes to being an artist, I don't think everything's about money. I sometimes just think it's just a state of mind that you're in.
Mhm.
I don't know, like for example, for yourself, like I'm sure you've been through those different states of mind, of states of
Oh, yeah.
creativity where like I want to do this. I want to try that.
Yeah, for me, when I was first being creative, it was music. So I was
Oh
writing my
wow.
own songs and singing and playing on the piano by ear because I don't read any music. So that was one of the things. And I still sing every once in a while. Like I perform with a 9-piece jazz band once a year and do some singing with them. So I have a lot of fun with that. But that's really the only time that I do any like what I would call a gig. And other than that, if I'm gonna record anything, it's usually in my own home studio, which is right behind there. And, yeah, and I just but when I was, I think I started playing the piano when I was 11, and,
Oh wow.
I was writing songs pretty regularly up until about the age of maybe 24. And then after that, I kinda didn't feel the need. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just kinda went out of me. I don't know why that is, but writing songs no long it became a bit of a chore. It wasn't.
I feel like if Billy Joel was here right now, he would be so devastated. He'd just be like, "I'm out of here. I'm out of here."
Well, I never really thought that it was something that I wanted to make a living at, and it wasn't something that
Right.
I was so passionate about that I wanted to do every second of the day. It was just something that when I was younger and angsty, I needed to get out on paper and sing. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that's
you
I
needed
I
like an
had to.
outlet. It was
Yeah.
like, yeah, to just relax and unwind. Oh, I
Yeah.
totally get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was an outlet, but it wasn't the creative thing that I wanted to spend my life doing. And I'm an introvert, really, when it comes right down to it. And
Same.
I had to, well, yeah, I've met a lot of podcasters that are introverts,
Oh, I
and
know,
I
it's
think it's
strange.
pretty common actually amongst us. But yeah, I I had to overcome a lot of shyness, and overcoming that, then I need my peace and quiet. So
Yes.
after I do something that's very highly public, I need to be able to step away and have some rest and relaxation and peace. And actually, peace for me means silence. It does not mean music. It means nothing.
Car dri For me, it's car drive with no
Uh-huh.
radio. I turn the radio off,
Yep.
just drive, nothing on.
I'm
I love it.
recognizing myself here. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it's funny, but yeah, I don't listen to music as a relaxing endeavor because for me, listening to music means I'm analyzing it constantly because and it gives me a headache almost. Like I'm trying to
Sometimes,
think
yeah.
about it too much, right? Yeah, so for me, that's not relaxing. So relaxing to me is concentrating on what I'm doing and utter silence. And that's just how I've gone through life. But what that has sort of taught me is that if I was to try and do something that's creative for a living, it wouldn't be something that is in front of an audience 24/7 because I wouldn't be able to handle that. That would be bad. So that's kind of why I went into voiceover because it's behind the scenes and because it has a certain amount of creativity to it. It is still acting. Even if you're acting for advertising, it's still acting.
It was my whole
And
child literally, I grew up in the early 2000s. My whole childhood was cartoons.
yeah,
Like, all of the cartoons I grew up with, all voiceover actors and
sure. Yeah.
actresses. Oh,
Yeah.
it's
That's not the
great.
type of work that I do, but I
Okay.
admire the people who do.
Yes.
And I totally grew up with cartoons in the 80s. So I know where you're coming from.
Oh my god, it was amazing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
can you, like, I can imagine though, for a voiceover actor or actress, that's a great career. Like, you could be really successful, but
Mhm.
complete privacy.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I totally love it. And at this point I don't even really go to studios anymore because I can do everything from my home studio.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
But I work with clients all over the world, so it's often easier for us to do that kind of a thing than go into a studio.
Even better.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of what I do is advertising and marketing and branding, which is kind of why I decided to talk about audio branding in the podcast. That's kind of my thing. But I'm not an audio brander myself. So the way that I kind of got away from being thought of as the authority in the subject in a way was to sort of say I'm a representative of you the audience and I'm asking questions of my experts. So that's kind of where I've geared
Oh
it.
my god. I
Yeah.
literally feel like this is Alice in Wonderland and the one with the mirror to glass something. Oh, into the looking glass.
Yeah.
No, because I same thing, like, this podcast is society and
Mhm.
culture, and also we're a stoner podcast. But the thing is, I'm no representative for any of those things. I am 24. I am talking from experience, from people that I'm meeting. So I always come from the audience's perspective. When I'm talking to
Mhm.
you as an expert, I'm talking from their perspective.
Mhm.
Because let's be honest, how do you think we learn as people? We ask questions.
Yeah. Very much so, yeah. Yeah. If you stop growing the minute you stop being curious.
Oh my god, yes, it's so
Yeah.
true. And it's so crazy in how being curious can sometimes be a crime. What is
Mhm.
wrong with being curious? What is wrong with asking questions?
Mhm. Yeah, agreed. I think more people should ask more questions, especially now.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
It it's so, I mean, it's so wild, especially what's been going on. But I don't like touching on it. I don't like breaking the bread, as you would say, because you then divide yourself, because then you have to put yourself on either one side or the other. And I don't like to
Mm.
be on one side or the other, but I can imagine, like, when you're making this podcast, you're bringing people on and you're having these conversations. I don't even know on how that would make you feel. Like, when you're dealing with these brands and companies, of course, you want to represent brands and companies that you can relate with, but
Yeah, I like to be curious and I like to ask questions about people who are on as a guest. I don't want to be threatening. So what I mean by that is I am not making my living in audio branding. I want to talk to people who are. And just because the podcast is called that doesn't mean I'm trying to make a living and competing with them,
right.
right? So I don't want them to think that I'm a competitor in what they're doing. I'm there to find out what they're doing so that the people who hire me, the voice actor, know what audio branding is and how important sound is and understand that there's a reason they're hiring people to do their sound or to be their voice actor or to, pay attention to that kind of thing in the
Like a
first place.
portfolio, like basically like adding to your portfolio.
Well, yes and no. It's less about me and more about trying to forward the idea that sound is important in general, really. But especially when it comes to advertising, and I think that a lot of people have, let that fall by the wayside because it wasn't convenient or they just assumed it was there and it really isn't. you
What do
know?
you what do you feel that, like, I've always been curious on how radio in a way failed now, but podcasting has flourished tremendously. It's kind of weird how both of them are audio. You have radio that have interviews. There's such a
Mhm.
thing. Like, there's not just
Sure.
radio
Yeah.
stations playing just audio all
Well,
day.
talk radio is great and it's still going on and news radio is still going on. There's a lot of radio that's still out there. It's just that right now radio is really the realm of the car, right? It's not something
Right.
that people maybe they might tune into an internet radio station, maybe, but
Maybe.
it's kinda unlikely. Like, even the older crowd is not really listening to radio on their computer. They're listening to it in their car. So and unfortunately, what's happening is that the local radio stations are being taken over by AI voices and AI programming, right? So, like, because there's really very few humans, there are a few, but there are very few humans left doing the radio programs. And I'm hearing about people being laid off from radio day after day on a regular basis. They go into voiceover. It happens a lot.
It,
So, yeah.
it's crazy because I remember when I was out in LA, there was a radio station I used to like listening to, and it turns out that none of the people were real.
Yeah.
It was all fake.
Mhm.
Like, they were the craziest part. I remember because Carissa, she's the co-host for American Groove. I was telling her, I'm like, wait a minute, so there's no, like, building in Long Beach? She's like, no. But they're two people talking to each other. She's like, I know, but they sound human. And she's like, I know, but they're not real. And I'm like, I had a serious moment. I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah. Well, it's getting more and more possible. And I'm not saying necessarily that it's something that shouldn't happen. I think that technology happens and we
Yes.
deal with it. And I just think that there need to be boundaries put in place. There needs to be transparency. So, like, they probably at some point let people know that they are not real people or your friend wouldn't have known,
No, they
right?
say it on their website, but they don't say
Okay.
it on the actual
Yeah.
radio
But they don't
station.
keep it hidden.
No.
They're not deliberately trying to hide it from people,
But they don't
right?
say anything when you're listening, though. They only show it
Yeah.
on your website. So it's kind of like you have to be willing to go on their website and see.
Yes.
It's a little
Yeah.
deceiving.
Maybe maybe a little, maybe a little. I would say it depends on whether those voices are licensed out real people or if they're created by a synthetic voice simulator. I don't
I
know
don't think they
whether.
were synthetic. I think it was they had actual people, like the voiceovers that
Mhm.
I don't know how they do it. They go over words and things so the
Yeah,
computer's able to put it together into a
yeah.
sentence.
So they purchased a voice probably from a subscription or something like
Something
that
like
then.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So, yeah, then what would immediately occur to me is, were the people doing those voices compensated for the use? And if yes, then sure, no problem. Is there a model in place now that adequately compensates people when their voices are used? No, I don't think there is, unfortunately. And that becomes the biggest problem.
Even
So,
look at like the craziest thing was like with Robin Williams. I mean, he was
yeah.
one of the biggest voice. So look at his contracts. Oh my god,
Mm,
it was. I when I read that article, it came out about 2 years after he passed away. It just went to show you how much mind manipulation and twisting there is. It's like so just in simple terms,
mhm,
basically Robbins Williams' voice is partially owned by Disney. So I something like 50 something percent insane.
mhm. Yeah.
So that means that the Disney company has rights to use his voice. What the hell?
Yeah, yeah. I
It's
think
crazy.
originally, before AI was even a thing, I think that mostly they were putting that clause in to make sure that they could promote the animation films that he was a part of. So, for instance, doing the genie,
Right.
right? So, they wanted to make sure that they had the ability to use scenes that the genie was in order to promote it wherever they were going to promote it. And when they use terms like in in mediums known now and known later, then it becomes an AI thing because there's no protection, right? Yeah, I mean, his estate might be able to claim that there's some, legal.
Yeah, but this is the problem. See, this is why people get very pissed off. Like, for example, with Paul McCartney, because
Mhm,
what Paul McCartney has basically done since the 1980s, he has bought all of the rights. So at this point, him and Ringo are basically the rightful owners for George and for John. Like,
mhm,
Yoko gave permission to Paul.
yeah,
So but unfortunately, a lot of people don't have these situations. I mean, first of all, the man is in his 80s, and this was a span of 60 years of his career where he got to where he is now. That's
yeah,
insane.
mhm.
It's an excellent point you bring up. A lot of people don't think about it, especially when your voice, your voice over actor. Where are your rights?
Yeah, I mean, right now, it's really ambiguous because there really isn't any precedent set in actual court.
Oh wow.
In Yeah, it's kind of it's this weird gray area where they're not really sure, pardon me, they're not really sure where the real voice ends and the synthetic voice picks up, because is the synthetic voice, if it's made by AI and a software company, really yours anymore? Or has it
Oh
become a
my
new
god.
entity? Is it copyrightable?
Oh my
Right now,
god.
they're saying that artwork, for instance, made by AI is not copyrightable, right? So there's all sorts of things that we need to figure out. What I would say is that transparency is key, and that people should own their own intellectual property, whether that means they're using it on behalf of a company or not. If it's out there in the public and they provided it, it should have some type of protection from being used to educate AI, so that whatever is created after that somehow gets out of their hands. I mean, that's the problem, right? We don't know what AI is using. We don't know how it's melding things. We don't know how much of us is in what the AI is creating and how much we own of that.
Just like branding is so vital for platforms such as both of ours,
Mhm.
I think the same thing should apply with artificial intelligence, where when you are using, and the thing is, I'm a libertarian, so my belief on this is very simple. If you make something and your name is on it, it's yours. If somebody tells you it's not, they're lying to you because your name is right on it. So it's yours. Same thing applies with, people that are doing programming, for example,
Mhm.
computer software. If you made the software, it's yours. The second you start getting into the twisty words of, well, if you get to this line, and if it's no, 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 you're using their work. So I don't care, it's artificial intelligence. You have to pay them the rights to use their work. So you cannot create your own David Chu artificial intelligence mural for someone to buy on Etsy for $28, which, by the way, is a thing. It's so stupid, but it's a thing.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And you cannot do that. It's not your work.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think is a possibility of this changing?
I think that lawyers and judges are going to have to figure out where the line begins and ends. And those precedents need to be set, and they need to be set really soon because AI is starting to already get out of control. And there will always be bad actors. There will always be people out there using it for scams or trying to take money from people or stealing things that don't belong to them. That's just going to happen because humans are humans. And
Fortunately,
yeah,
but yes.
unfortunately, it's what happens. But
Uh,
there need to be protections in place for the people who have the intellectual property that can be stolen. And I think that that is going to be a high priority in the next little while. I know, for instance, when it comes to voice synthesis, there's a company out there that's a not for profit called the Open Voice Network, and they are funded by Linux. And they've put together a whole bunch of discussions and white papers, and they've come up with a contract for voice actors to supply their voices for synthetic use and all sorts of interesting aspects of what's coming up with AI and voice. And they're a company definitely worth watching. So if anyone's interested in that, I would highly suggest that they check
what's
out
the
the
name of the
Open Voice
company?
Network. It's called Open Voice Network.
Okay. That's really it's really cool, especially when it comes to synthetic voicing,
Mhm.
because it has really revolutionized the way that we can see films. Uh think about it. There are films that have people that have been dead like 40, 50 years, and it
Mhm.
sounds, recently I forgot the name of the film that had, I think, Andy Warhol, but I mean he's been dead for, I think, almost over 30 years.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. Like you couldn't even tell that it was a synthesized voice. Crazy.
Yeah. Wasn't it Anthony Bourdain that they did that with without telling people?
I think something
They
like that.
got into big trouble with about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, lines need to be drawn. They need to figure out where this is going. And consent and transparency is going to be key during all of that.
Yes, it
Yeah. It's
is.
all about consent.
Yeah, I feel like safety and protection and privacy is kind of being thrown out the door in many
Yeah.
ways. I think this
Yeah.
is why there's been a resurgence of the underground and independent artists and creators and filmmakers and writers, because how do you expect these people to make a god honest living if they don't know if it's going to be happening tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, that's what the people who are on strike now with SAG-AFTRA are partially fighting for. A lot of it has to do with AI writers and background actors being scanned in order to be added to other movies.
Do you know what the best artificial intelligence program I feel? It's expensive for writing. It's called Grammarly.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yes, I've heard of it. Yeah.
You know why? Because you get to sit there. I'm dyslexic, and I I have a reading and learning impairment, so I sometimes
Mhm.
will write things backwards, and it'll show you where your commas are supposed to go, where your periods are supposed to go. So you do the writing, and it uses artificial intelligence input to show you how you can better your sentences.
I see. Yeah.
That is the best way to use artificial intelligence
Mhm.
because you're helping people able to write, not just taking a bunch of people's writings from different articles, because that's what artificial is doing. It's just taking things from
Yeah.
different places and then just giving you that. So,
Yeah. I like to use things like ChatGPT for
yes,
ideas. So
yes,
so for ideas. So for like a little hint of something, I'm not asking it to write anything for me. I'm just asking it to tell me, some ideas for this particular scenario. Or if I need to, let's say, make a title of my podcast 120 characters in order to fit into a particular field where I'm promoting the podcast in some place, and it has to be 120 characters, including spaces, then I'm just going to put in that title and say, make this 120 characters with spaces. Give me an idea for, and then it does it. And that means I don't have to worry about that kind of thing. So for that, I love it. I think it just saves time. But, when it's creating things out of supposedly nothing, it's not creating things out of nothing.
nothing.
It's
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 taking other
learning
people's
from.
work.
Exactly. Yeah, and that becomes the issue.
Yes. And
Yeah.
it's a, I mean, for your own self and like for your own career,
Mhm.
and you've been dealing with, having people coming on, especially working with audio branding. Have you had people on like talking about how this has negatively affected them and their career and their business?
Not directly, actually. We've
Okay.
talked about synthetic voice, and I've actually had some people on my podcast who have synthetic voice companies. So they make the software that makes synthetic voices possible. And they're actually, many of them were working in the realm of helping podcasters do better work with their podcasts, making it easier for them to have certain options available to them. And in those kinds of aspects, I can kind of see how it would be useful and how things might progress. But I haven't really had anyone tell me that their career has been devastated by AI. I think that most people I know in the audio business are using it again, even musicians, for ideas, for the spark of something to continue on with. They're not using it to finish things. They're using it to maybe give a few ideas of how to start so that, you're not figuratively looking at the blank white page for too long.
Right. Right.
Right? So in that way, I can see that it would be really super useful. Finishing it for you, I've never really seen anyone do that. And especially not for audio branding, because audio branding is almost more of an art than a science. So when it comes to that, you're dealing with emotions, and a computer can't feel emotions. It just doesn't know what to do with that.
Not yet.
So, well, honestly, if we're talking about AI as learning from previous things that have been fed into its database, then no, it's not feeling emotions. It's just taking what it has and making something out of it, right? It's not actually genuinely been given autonomous thought. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Yeah.
I this is a deep thought, but it's
Yeah.
something to take in mind.
Uh-huh.
Right now they're developing what's called a quantum computer, which is the next generation of computers.
Okay.
The realization is this: the most powerful computer that exists is Mother Nature. The
Okay.
development of how a planet is formed in our known universe is all done through math, science,
Mhm.
physics, almost like a computer ran the data, went through the design, went through the layout, and over time and evolution kept on refinishing,
Mhm.
remolding, restructuring, getting better and better. So, as much as we like to think, we are, in itself live in a computer, the most powerful computer that has ever existed that we know of.
Well, then our bodies would be computers too, in a
Correct.
way, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. Organics as opposed to, computer components. Yeah, I mean, it's true. We could say that evolution or whatever has created us, the Big Bang or whatever created our universe is a big computer simulation. I mean, who knows? Right? But yeah, but we have to deal with what we have here on the earth now.
Right.
And unfortunately, humans are ruining the computer that is Mother Nature. And we need to figure out how to fix that.
Do you know, by the way, that like this is so random, but you know that some animals have actually been fighting back. Recently, I heard that there have been whales that have been throwing ships overboard, like destroying ships.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I heard cases. I heard recently there was a case of like there was a gorilla or something where that like escaped from a zoo and like literally went and it attacked a person. Oh, it was crazy. Uh, Again, like I know it's like so out of the realm, but it's kind of a way of like the Earth being like, "Hey, kind of made you. I can kind of get rid of you in a matter of a second."
Yeah. Oh, totally, totally. What do you think the weather is doing?
I'm in Florida and it's like 1 minute it's raining, 1 minute like I'm dead serious. Sometimes it looks like the world is gonna die. The
Yeah.
sky is so dark, and then all of a sudden just sunshine. And you're like, what?
Half of Canada is burning.
I know that's crazy. What is
I
going
mean,
on in
like,
Canada?
yeah, well, I have no
I
idea,
have no idea
but
either.
yeah, okay. I think what is happening is that, and this happens in California every year as well, and it just sort of spread. We just haven't been hearing about it. I'm just outside of Toronto. So we are experiencing really bad smog and, you know, air quality and all of that every once in a while when this happens. But really, the first time that I ever noticed it was this year. And I know that Californians deal with this on a regular basis because the trees out there, because it just gets so dry, they, along that coast, they just,
There's
that
a
along, yeah, just
th-
all starts burning.
reason
Just
why they have forest fires, and you realize that when you move there.
mhm.
And the reason is because they move the water supply. And they keep
Ah,
on
yes.
moving the water supply, and they keep on.
Yeah.
I remember when it was so bad. I remember I came out of my car to work, and it looked like the apocalypse.
Mhm. Like yellow, orangey
Yes,
yellow. Yeah.
orangey yellow. It's like you can't
Yeah.
see a thing. It's like when a
Yep.
person walks towards you, it's like black and vivid. You're like, oh my god! But it turns out
Yeah.
it's just like a normal person that's right in front of you. I can't even.
Yeah, it's very strange. But you're right that, Mother Nature is kind of helping us to wake up a little, nudging us. These are a little more than nudges now, but yeah.
In a way,
Ugh.
in a way though, like art and creativity and sound and pictures and visuals in itself is an organic feeling. Why do we like seeing movies? Why do we like television shows? Why do we like commercials? Why do we like audio? I think it's not just a mechanical or computer thing. I think it's an organic thing. There's something that we as humans from the beginning, we have a connection to these things, and we it makes us happy.
Yeah, storytelling. It's all about storytelling. That's what keeps our attention, and it's what makes us feel like life is worth living. So, yeah, I mean, and it really is all about telling a story. And the fact of the matter is that visuals and audio together tell a better story. That's really as simple as it is.
It does. It gives you your own perspective, I feel, because I love when you go to see a film or you see a TV show, everyone is going to have their opinion. Just try that. When
Yeah,
you go to
yeah,
the
yeah.
office or work, like just bring up a show and you're
Mhm.
like, well, I thought this character, no, that character should have been dead last season. No, that, everybody's got their opinions on it.
Yeah.
But I feel that's what visual and audio does to people. It allows people to have their own story for a change.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Being a part of that story is, I think, very creative for a lot of people. So, yeah, I think it's important. I think storytelling is important. It's how we learn more about who we are.
You feel that storytelling has been a very important part of your life?
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, every time I come on a podcast, I know I have to tell a story, right? If I don't tell a story, no one's interested.
Uh, it's
Every time I do a podcast,
yeah, in
it's
a
about
way.
the arc.
Oh my god. It's kind of weird. I never really think about it that way, but in it is. It's a story, you
Mhm.
know? I mean, this is something I can talk about in like 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, yeah,
Crazy. Isn't that
and it's
amazing?
very creative. Yeah.
Can you imagine, like, even for yourself in your own career, like the past years or so, where people you've met along the journey and just thinking back now, where you are now as a person? It's amazing on how far we go as artists. And I think that's one of the most exciting things is just the journey on the VW bus going all the way
Yep.
to Woodstock 69.
That's a little before my time, but
It's okay. No, it's okay.
yeah.
It's before my time too, but I wish I was there. Can we get can we get a time machine so we can go, please? I want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich while listening to Jimi Hendrix. Yes.
That would be kind of awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God. Wow, we've been doing this for an hour. Jesus. Let me
Yes.
let me ask you this. For anybody that has
Sure.
managed to be here and we love y'all. We love y'all. Where can they find your socials? Where can they find your podcast and check out more?
Well, all they need to do is go to my voiceover website. That's at voiceoversandvocals.com, and
Okay.
all of the info is there. They'll
Wow.
find everything they need to find.
Super simple. Everything in
Yep.
one spot. One stop shop.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, if you like what you like, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to check out more of the podcast, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Lost in the Groove Pod. So, with that, we'll catch you on the next one. Stay groovy, my friends. Adios.